In this pre-class video, we will be reviewing learning objectives A and B. So this unit, we will be continuing our exploration of major evolutionary transitions, and we'll be looking at major groups of microbes, plants, and animals. And to start us off in this unit, the first module, we look at how we are able to classify and understand the evolutionary relationships amongst different groups of organisms. So I just wanted to start by showing you some older classification schemes. Before, even earlier than the one on the left, we used to, or people used to, classify organisms into basically plants or animals. So you make your own food or you don't, and that was a very simple classification scheme. Over time, we got to more defined schemes that included the plants that are able to photosynthesize, animals that eat their own food, and then the fungi that absorb food. So that kind of early classification scheme was based on a particular property of how one acquires nutrition. On the right side, we have a tree of life. This is a very large phylogenetic tree, and you can see most of it is dominated by microbes. So the bacteria, the archaea, those two domains we've discussed before are made up of prokaryotic type cells. And then we've got plants and animals. And just where we are, we're just a little blip. So again, if you look at all of these different, and this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but if you look at this particular tree of life, you can see clearly that we are a minor blip in terms of biodiversity overall on Earth. So in order to study these groups of microbes and plants and animals, we do need to have a good understanding of how we determine evolutionary relationships amongst organisms. And there's a couple of different branches of evolutionary biology that we'll need to look at, and one of them is systematics. The systematics is classifying organisms in a way to help determine their evolutionary relationships. And there are a number of different ways that one could do this. You could look at fossil evidence. So we could look at morphology. So maybe we're looking at different fossils that have similar morphological characteristics. So morphology, again, is form. So they look the same or have similar characteristics. We can also use molecular data. Molecular data would include looking at sequences of DNA, RNA, and proteins, so the amino acid sequences. And then we could look at genetic data as well. So we could look at the types of genes that are present in different organisms. And by comparing using any of these approaches, again, any of the approaches are still going to allow you to infer evolutionary relationships. Those evolutionary relationships are called phylogenies. So the phylogeny is the evolutionary history of a species or group of related species. So these are called phylogenies. And typically how we represent phylogenies is using phylogenetic trees. And so we can look at branching on the tree as basically a hypothesis for how a group of organisms might be related and what their evolutionary story might be. Another branch of evolutionary biology is taxonomy, which is a naming system. So taxonomy allows us to name organisms in a logical way based on similarities that they share. This approach was hallmarked by the scientist Carolus Linnaeus in the 18th century, and he had developed a very logical system for naming different species. With the taxonomy, though, it does not in itself allow us to infer evolutionary relationships. So we can use taxonomy for naming purposes, but not for inferring evolutionary relationships. So with the taxonomy, we categorize organisms into kingdoms, then phylums, class, order, family, and so on, so that each individual species will end up with its own specific epithet and a genus name. The genus can include more than one species. So for humans, as an example, we are Homo sapiens. So the genus is the Homo genus. Our specific epithet is sapiens. And by convention, we always want to capitalize the genus name, lowercase for the specific epithet, and it's going to be in italics. And so each organism will have their own unique genus and species name. So we'll take a look at the taxonomic naming of a leopard as an example. So at the very top, we have a specific species of a large cat, the leopard, and we'll see how we can work our way down to that specific organism, starting out at a broader taxonomic division. So we have talked about 3 domains of life: the domain bacteria, domain archaea, that are both made up of prokaryotic cells. And a leopard, of course, is going to be in the domain eukarya, made up of eukaryotic cells. And it's going to be in the animal kingdom, along with all other animals. The phylum is, for the leopard, is Chordata. These are animals that mostly have backbones. That's not the defining feature of the chordates. We'll come back to that later when we look at animals. But in terms of some examples of chordates, that would include humans. So I'll just put us. That would include Puff, the bearded dragon. It would include Elsa the dog, my cats that live with me, and all other animals, etc. When we go down, so as we move towards the leopard, we're getting into more exclusive categories here. So if we go into the class, the leopard is in the class Mammalia. Mammals have hair, they produce milk, so we can't include Puff anymore, but we can include us, we can include dogs, we can include cats still, and many other mammals. Then when we get to the order Carnivora, we are not in that order, we are in the primate order, so we're going to exclude humans at this point, but we would still include things like dogs and cats. And then when we get even more exclusive into the family, Felidae, we're going to have to get rid of the dogs. The dogs are in the canine family, so now we're just left with the cats, which again would include the domestic cat and big cats. The genus Panthera, we're getting even more exclusive. This would include what we call the roaring cats, which would include lions, jaguars, leopards, and tigers. And then specifically this species, the Panthera pardus, is a leopard. So it is a type of big cat, but it's not the same as a lion, it's not a jaguar, it's not a tiger, etc. So you can see as we move towards the specific epithet for this particular species that we're getting more and more exclusive. Okay. So in class, we'll come back and look at how we can study this information in a slightly different way using phylogenies, which allow us to make hypotheses about evolutionary relationships amongst organisms.